I don't think I've ever seen a show just outright introduce a new character, much less spend an entire episode introducing that new character halfway during its first season. But here we are. I'm going to give you my thoughts and reactions to the fifth episode of the Peripheral called What About Bob? Right after the jump. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. The fifth episode is here of the Peripheral, called What About Bob? We start off with a flashback of Grace and Alita. Alita had apparently been in a previous relationship with Grace, so she has returned back to her in this flashback with some ulterior motives. She just comes out of the blue, out of nowhere, where enough time has passed where Grace is married to a man and had kids, very much to the chagrin of Alita. But Alita is trying to get some information out of her, and does eventually get her to go out for that one drink, and that drink leads to her eventually bringing her to her office. Basically, it's the office in the building where Alita takes Flynn in the very first episode. It's kind of going back to ground zero to see how she found out what that lab was and what was all down there. It also explains she runs into a security person down there who has eyes that she sort of gives a foreboding line to. It's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, kind of corny a little bit, but that's when she sees the way that she's going to sort of make her way back down here and get in through this. We also get a point where we see that the haptic nerves that are in Burton have been scouted and placed and put into place via this whole company. So all of that, the haptic drift that's happening with those nerves and that whole system is sort of all tied together with what's happening with the Peripheral and everything that's happening with this VR headset and all that good stuff. It could explain why, with all the RI, like all being attached to the RI and all being attached to the military, her seeing the military, this could sort of explain why Alita reached out to Burton to be the one to sort of test this VR. Like, she may have used them as the key, but there's some type of connection there that I think is going to come into play as we go along. So the majority of this episode takes place in the present day. That is kind of where we all land. It's the first episode that really does that. We have a bookend sequence with the future, but we spend a lot of time in Flynn's present day timeline. And in that, we are spending it with Bob, brand new character, very generic name, but he comes out and we find out that he's a hired gun. Someone has delivered the gun that Sharice's second in command, who is now dead, but now a droid, the gun that he used that was basically like sending a sonic sound through the chest and kind of had all that effect on Flynn. He sent that to him in the present day. And he sees it, he tests it, and then he gets a call, but basically saying, you got $10 million in your account. I'm going to need you to go handle this. My man's like, I'm off the clock. He basically said, I'm out of the game. And then they threaten his daughter. What then takes place is, he's like, all right, well, then I don't have a choice. I have to go do this. But what then takes place is he knows that if somebody knows about my daughter, they got it from one place. So he has to go handle that first. And it's a pretty intense scene just to show you what he's capable of and how specific, how thought out, how meticulous Bob is. He has to go through this whole thing. It's like, hey, friend. He knows that, hey, you're the only person who knows this. And he takes out him and the anybody that is trying to stop him, as well as the guard, the bartender who was there, pulls out a shotgun on him. He doesn't care about that. He's just like, before I move on to this mission that I'm supposed to go do, I'm going to make sure that all the loose ends that I have to tie up or get tied up first before I go do this. So that once I take this over and do it, I don't have to worry about protecting my daughter anymore. He does call his daughter before he moves on to the next part of his mission to sort of let her know that, hey, I'm back in the game. I've been compromised. Something's going on. His daughter sort of lets him know that, hey, I'm pregnant. And he kind of, in his coded language that he could, kind of says, well, I wish the best for you and your future. That's his way of saying to her, I'm in the game again. Something's come up. I got to do this one last job. And sort of to give her the heads up. So then he sets a trap. Before he does that, Billy Ann does find the money that Jasper has received from his uncle. She confronts him about it. And he bold-faced lies to her, right up all up in her face. He says, "No, it was a good gesture. I can give this back if I want to. Not there's no strings attached to it." And Billy Ann's kind of like, "Well, you don't need to give it back because we're in the financial straits. She's still looking for odd jobs. She's like a gig worker. She's taking any job that she can find. So the money needs to be had. If there's no strings attached to it, let's go ahead and do it." But we all know, and she was right, that there's some strings attached to it. The next sequence shows to show you the elaborate plan that Bob has sort of set up. He shows that his car has kind of been broken down on the side of the road, and he's waiting for Flynn and Burton to come back from the spinal tap. She has to get a spinal tap done to sort of see what's going on with her. Which, by the way, before we get to the bridge, kind of leads me to believe some of the things that I was saying. There's some type of disease, some type of virus that is in her system, in her bloodstream. It's very faint, something that they haven't seen before, but it's in her like spine. It's in her brain. Leads me to believe that her going back and forth in that VR, some of the stuff that I was saying before might actually be correct. Where when she is in the future and in the VR headset, while she's not getting the full contact of whatever was happening in that world, breathing and all that stuff, because they all have sort of an inhibitor that helps them immunity boost. She doesn't have one. And maybe they don't think about it that the Poles have to have one, but there's something that is affecting her. It's getting into her a little bit that is still messing up her senses. She takes a spinal tap and they're on their way home. Bob sets up a trap, if you will. Broken down car. But Billy Ann on her way home, she's a mechanic. She knows what she's doing. She's like, "Hey, I can help you out." And my Bob says, "No, I'm good. I believe you can, but I don't need you," because he's setting up to get Burton and Flynn. So she pulls off, but then she's like, "No, I can help you." So she pulls back, comes back in, and right when Burton and Flynn are coming, the trap's afoot. He comes out with that sonic gun. Flynn catches it before he shoots it, and it's a pretty cool action sequence that takes place. They're going back and forth. Flynn and them manage to sort of escape and get the upper hand on him, much to the help of Billy Ann. Billy Ann pulls out one of them nice sawed-off shotguns. She's like, "I'm about this life too. Like, don't think I'm a mechanic, but I also know what I'm doing with this gun." And she fires in a couple of rounds. Burton also gets a couple of rounds off into the chest. Then Billy Ann also gets a couple buckshots of the shotgun in. But he's getting up like a Terminator. He's got a vest on. So whatever he was prepped to go to war in this little moment here. But they get the upper hand on him, but they don't kill him. They call Tommy to come and sort of clean up the scene. While Tommy's there, he sort of splits the three of Billy Ann, Burton, and Flynn up and kind of talks to them all one-on-one. Something that Flynn clocks is like, "Hey, that's normally how you talk to the criminals or whatnot. Why are you treating us like this?" Because it's clear that Tommy's trying to get underneath the hood, because this stuff that's happening in their small town is not normal. And he and Flynn sort of have a back and forth. He goes on this whole little diatribe of like, "Hey, I remember you from school with this young little sweet girl that was 2 grades under me. I remember her, and I think I want to protect that girl, and I know she's still in there. So you just gotta help me help you." And Flynn's like, "Cool. I don't care about any of that right now. I can't put you in this." And she wants to give Tommy everything, but she knows that Burton will get really pissed off about all that. So she still keeps it close to the vest. Tommy goes off with Bob in the backseat and runs off, and then Billy Ann, because the car got damaged that Burton and Flynn were driving, Billy Ann drives the two of them back. In the car back with Flynn and Burton, Billy Ann is asking, saying, "Hey, if you need help, if you're here, I'm here for you." Burton's like, No, we don't trust you," basically. Flynn's being quiet. Billy Ann kind of is like, "Hey, look, I know everything's going on. I know about the future. I know about all this. I know about all that." And Burton's like, "Hey, look, you're not the problem." He alludes to that Jasper is, and she kind of gets defensive of her husband. Like, "Jasper, if you got a problem with Jasper, you got a problem with me. Like, we're one." And he would never hurt Flynn, which, who knows? Start throwing money around. Flynn, I feel like Billy Ann is going to be in this for a rude awakening. But I do love, in this show so far, we've seen that Billy Ann is about that life, and she's willing to go back for her friends and go to swing whenever she has to. So I feel like if Jasper does get out of line with Flynn, she's going to side with Flynn before she does with Jasper. It just feels that way. They get dropped off at home. Meanwhile, Tommy gets ambushed. He gets knocked off the road by a mysterious person. He is going back and forth with Bob, and Bob's telling him about life, and Tom's like, "Hey, are you the type of person to fall for this and kind of getting in under his skin, getting in to see if he can kind of just let him go. And then the car gets hit when he kind of gives him a yes or no question. Tommy doesn't even have time to answer. Car gets hit by one of those invisible vehicles. We don't actually see who's in the car. We just see the shoes and the feet come, drag Bob out of the car, get back into the invisible vehicle, and pull off. And Tommy's kind of just like, what the hell, all bloodied and battered. So now, whatever Flynn and them are into, it's Tommy's kind of paying attention to it because it's bigger than what he thought it was, and something's happening with invisible cars are all involved in this. Flynn and Burton are at home, and they're talking, and they're kind of talking about Billy Ann. And Burton's like, we can't keep telling Billy Ann more. We got to keep her at bay. And Flynn's like, I trust her. I think we'll be fine. And then they realize that their mom is not in the room, and she's been quiet. And they find out that she's outside, scooping around, and has been told that they bought their bodies in the yard. And at that point, they got to come clean to Mama. And they tell Mama everything. They tell her that she's been to the future, tell her that them drugs came from the future, as from a recipe, prescription that they got from the future. They tell them about the money. And Mama is having a hard time with the future part of it. She's like, that seems to be a lot for me to wrap my brain around. But the other things make sense. And I can kind of get on board with them. But my issue with them, and where I'm like, what this all means is, if I stop taking these pills, or if you don't go plug back in, or if we don't take that, if you don't get that money to Corbel every week, what then? Like, we are at the mercy of them. We don't control anything. They have us under their thumb. Are we good with that? And that sort of is when it does hit Flynn a little bit. Like, hey, we gotta fight back. We can't keep being at the mercy of them all the time. So there's got to be something that we do to kind of punch them in the mouth, let you know that, hey, you're not gonna always punk us and always bully us around. So Flynn is ready to go hop back into that. Into the peripheral and get back in there. And Burton's like, hey, what are you doing? We don't even know if it's safe. He's like, look, it's safer for me to go plug in than it is for us to wait around here and just kind of be chickens where to get popped off whenever they choose to, whenever they feel like it's time to come get us. We're at that mercy. So she plugs back in and sort of gives Wilf the riot act. Because Wilf had always said that, hey, if there's any trouble coming, we'll give you the heads up. We'll let you know. We'll warn you. Didn't warn him about Bob. Didn't even know that Bob was happening. Like, something got through that you just left her out there all alone. And she's pretty pissed about that. Understandably so. She should be reading Wilf the Riot Act. She then also asks Wilf, like, hey, real quick, when we put our senses together and we had that haptic drift, which Wilf pretends and may not know what that means, but when we had that, were you trying to do something more to it? Like, were you trying to get a romantic connection on you? Because I'm starting to trust you. And Wilf's like, no, I was not. He's like, okay, well, I'm starting to get feelings that I trust you, and I don't know if it's real or if it's earned or if it's something from what we felt together. But can I trust you? Wilf and Flynn have a bit more of a conversation. Wilf talks about the time where, hey, he went on the attack and became sort of the more domineering person in the situation. He cut people and sliced people, and it felt bad. He felt like, hey, he kind of went too far. And Flynn's like, well, you did the right thing. And he's like, there's a fine line between self-defense and being the violent aggressor for it. Flynn's like, cool. Well, I'm going to go be the aggressor. I'm going to go punch someone in the mouth and just kind of get some information. So she plans to go see Charisse, and that's her plan. She goes to the office, and he's like, you scan my face, you know who I am. Get Charisse down here. And Charisse comes, and they have a heart-to-heart. They have a heart-to-heart, and it gets violent really quickly. They start punching and kicking, and it looks pretty staged and choreographed. I don't think the action sequences that they've had there's the best. But they fight a bit. And what we learn is that the Charisse that is presenting to us seems to be a Polt or Peripheral, like her themselves. Like they are several levels down. That is not actually Charisse. So who knows how deep Charisse, how many layers she has. There's a lot of people who don't mess with her, who don't like her, so she knows she's not well liked by a lot. So she may be pretty well hidden. But what we also learn here is that Charisse doesn't know if Flynn does or does not have the thing. She thought she did. She's like, hey, you have something for mine. And what Flynn comes back to say is like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have no clue at all what you're talking about. And in that point, Charisse is like, well, you're either completely woefully ignorant, or you do have it and you're lying. Either way, I gotta kill you. She does say she gives her a minute, like, if you bring stuff back to me, all we'll let bygones be bygones, which we all know Sharice is not. That's not the type of person, and she's going to murder her no matter what. Flynn's aware, and they get into a battle, and Flynn shows her wits, and she gets the one up. I think what we're going to come to learn, because she snaps her neck and just walks off. It's like, hey, the next time I'm coming straight for you. I'm coming from the real you, and this isn't going to be a warning shot. And just to show you that there is a little bit of bite and a fight to Flynn, who's been sort of the passive rabbit this entire time. I think what's good about this episode is that we're going to learn that there's already some type of connection with us seeing in the flashback that Alita had already seen that the military people had the haptic stuff. I think there's going to be a connection between Burton and Flynn into the future already. But I also think that whatever it is that Sharice is looking for, if it's a code, if it's something, numbers, I don't know whatever that is, I believe Flynn has it unknowingly. I think it might be somewhere stashed or saved in the VR headset in that peripheral. Somewhere she has access to it. She just isn't aware. And when she finds out, that's going to sort of be her leverage to kind of get through, get the one leg up on Sharice to kind of get out of some of the pain points that she's in. We don't see Corbel at all in this. And I don't think he's the one driving that car or picking up Bob. Because I don't know how he would get access to the vehicle. But there's somebody, might even be Lev, who is back from the future to sort of be there with them. But there's somebody from that timeline who's kind of causing even more chaos and stuff for Flynn and Burton. A really solid episode, all in all, that I think establishes another player in the board for Burton. I think he's going to be sort of that, like, I'm using comic book lore, sort of like that bullseye for Kingpin. Like somebody out there, people who want them dead. He's going to be that person that just kind of comes nonstop. And I think until they kill him, this is going to be just sort of the way it is. I like some of the stuff in the present day because it feels more tangible, it feels more real. It feels like there's more of a cause and effect and more of a, if you don't make it out, this is going to end well for you. But I would love to get a little bit more time in that Peripheral going back to the future. I think this show has not worn out its welcome yet. They are still doing that, like, we'll give you seeds here and there, but I think we're coming to the last few episodes of the season. So we should be, in this next episode, almost has to be the one where we get some big reveal, I think, to sort of show what is the tie between Burton and Flynn in the future and why they were the ones that were chosen. So far, I'm still fully invested, fully in. This gets me, and I like the almost Justified-esque writing that kind of happened with Bob in this episode. But what did you guys think about this episode called What About Bob? Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodAEI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDid@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts, we are there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.